This is Nice Guy Eddie, and you're listening to In My Humble Opinion on Rainbow Radio.
It all comes down to the things you do, 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 do. Take me away to another place where we can live our lives for ourselves. A place where no one judges us. We exist as we are, and no other realms. All that we want is simply to be
That was Take Me Away by Katie Benoit, the lead track on her newly remastered album Shattering the Silence. I'm joined here tonight by the artist herself, Katie Benoit. Katie, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is really interesting. It's not necessarily something that I would have picked up, not necessarily my style of music, but it was described, I read on one of the sites, it was described as synth pop, post-punk, post-alt rock. And I mean, as I'm listening to it, I'm trying to place it, I'm picturing like a little bit Annie Lennox, a little bit Pink. Where would you, how would you describe what this is all about?
Oh gosh. Well, I think it's a combination of influences of all sorts of different people. When I was a little kid, I was influenced a lot by singer-songwriters, by, Cat Stevens. And then of course in the 80s, there was Annie Lennox. And as I got older, actually, it was a lot of experimental electronic stuff that kind of influenced me, like more Aphex Twin or Moby. And, I listened to a lot of alt rock, to be honest with you. I think I grew up on rock. There's always been an appeal to it. I don't really have any type of category for my style of music. I just kind of do what I do. For the sake of argument, I generally say synth pop because that's probably the closest adjacent genre. But I do, if I do the same style of music, I generally get bored really easy. So.
Right. And I saw that on your website, it was saying how you've got some older stuff, which is maybe more pop and trying a lot of different genres.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So with the songs on this, I'm getting a very much of a personal story kind of unfolding. That opening track,
Right.
Take Me Away. And I'm just hung up on the lyrics, free to be ourselves, free of judgment, a place where no one can judge us. And it sounds like I'm getting a really for looking for a home, looking for that place of belonging kind of a thing. So what is this all about and what's inspiring this?
Well, for me as a transgender woman, it's been hard to kind of try to find a place in society where I feel that I can just relax and just be myself because of the expectations that society has for human beings in general, but also transgender people in specific. There's all sorts of stereotypes roaming around, and especially trans women or visibly transgender people get harassed a lot.
Right.
So for me, this song was kind of about wishing for that utopia. A lot of times in the trans community, we hear other trans people say, gosh, I wish I could buy like this big house, in the middle of nowhere where we could just have a commune and just kind of be free to exist. And that ideal is kind of what that's about. It is a utopian ideal. So it's an idealized version of what that would be like.
Right. Right.
But it really is about, I just want to be in a place where I can just be myself and not be judged. And I think that actually it's not obviously exclusive to trans people. That's one thing that I try to do with the album is I try to make it about my own personal feelings, but also something that other people who are not trans or queer or everything else that I am can relate to.
Right. And that was where especially starting with that song and then going into Rules and some of the other tracks, as I'm thinking about it, of course, again, first time hearing this and I'm looking at it through the lens of, okay, this is a song written by a trans woman. So of course I'm looking at it through those lights and I'm hearing that aspect of it. But then I'm struck by the fact, and as I'm listening to the lyrics for Take Me Away, why am I limiting it that much? Because it really is for anybody who is struggling to belong, to find their tribe, to find that place.
Exactly.
That they can just be who they are and not have those expectations, have those judgments. And it's a really good sentiment.
And, I think that's a universal sentiment too. I think all that any of us want is to be able to just kind of exist as we are. And for a lot of people, including myself, that may change sometimes in regards to what that looks like. And really, I think good songwriting will speak to a broad audience. So if I'm writing about a certain aspect of my life, I want to try to make sure that other people are going to be able to relate to it.
Yeah.
So, there's a reason why things like Cat Stevens' music has reached so many people is because people can relate to it on so many different levels.
Right. And this is probably like, I don't know, either a million people have thought of this or I'm just weird, but like I hear Father and Son, and I've heard that song forever, but something made me think of it as like a coming out story. And I was like, oh my God. And now I can't think of it any other way.
And it could be. And I think Father and Son, as many times as I've listened to it, it's basically just much like a lot of the music that I do. It's about expectations and it's about, I hope that you're going to be happy in the future. And I think that's all that any parent could really wish for is for their children to be happy.
Right. And that feeds very much into the second track, which is Rules. And
Right.
again, someday I will be complete. I must survive these rules. Why do they hurt me? Call me names.
Yeah.
Well, we were just talking about stereotypes and expectations and whatnot.
Mhm.
What place is this coming from then?
Well, I spent, gosh, I want to say about a good 10 years during my school career having to deal with being bullied. And that came from me being at the time a male-bodied person who was acting very feminine, just naturally.
Mm.
And there was nothing I could really do about it. I tried so many different things to not act that way, but it came so naturally to me. It was so ingrained in who I was.
Right.
That anytime I tried to change it, it wouldn't work, or I felt, like I was sacrificing too much of myself. So Rules is about that feeling of, I want to be myself, but I have to wait until I am in a situation where I have that freedom.
Mm.
So for me, I knew that once I was able to get out of high school, things could start to improve. I would have more of a chance of actually being able to be me. But then, of course, the expectations of society came in and I kept putting it off because it was easier to put it off. That hell in its own way was kind of comfortable. The dysphoria that I felt being transgender. So it's like, if I can get to the point mentally where I'm ready to make this leap, I just have to try to survive the expectations that other people have of me. And again, I don't think that's unique to the trans experience.
Right.
Everybody's experience to a degree.
And that, again, it goes back to the lens through which I'm listening to these.
Yeah.
Because I know you from Facebook. We've talked.
We have many conversations.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so I'm taking this music. I'm going, okay, I know this was written by a trans woman, but then as I'm listening to a song like Rules and talking about the expectations and the societal stuff, all the mental baggage, if you will, I'm looking at this. I'm like, okay, so this is about her. She's talking about her experiences. And then again, you have that moment where it's like, stop. No, this is actually universal.
Right.
And I think if I had just listened to this song like out of the blue, I would never have picked up on that necessarily. I think it's one of those things that because I was looking at it through that lens, it's like, that's sort of like obvious to me. But the theme is universal.
And I think that's just something that society has kind of baked in, is that if we're aware of somebody, whether they're trans or queer or non-binary, or even to go as far as race or background or skin color, if we know that ahead of time, a lot of times we ourselves will put that within that focus instead of kind of just taking the music and the lyrics on the face of it and just taking it as the statement that it is. I don't know. I mean, I like seeing pictures of the people that I listen to, but it's not always required. I listen to a lot of different music, and half the time it's like, I don't care if they're gay or queer or, none of that really matters. What matters is the music good? Is it something that is touching my soul? Is it something that's speaking to me? And I don't like to think of myself as a trans musician. I like to think of myself as a musician who just happens to be trans.
Right. Right.
But I mean, I do look at it through that lens just from my own point of view, but I try to make it accessible to everybody.
Yeah. And as I'm writing my notes, as I'm listening to these tracks, I'm just sitting here like, either this is narrowly focused on stuff that trans people deal with in every day, and that kind of thing, or this is universal stuff, but I'm missing part of this because I'm too focused on looking for that one angle. And it really is, especially those first two songs, just such a universal message.
Well, and you know what? That's just called being human.
Right, exactly. So I guess before we go on to some of the other tracks, what got you started in all this? How did you?
Oh my gosh. Well, for the first 10 years of my life, I was an only child, and I had a single mom who was trying to go to college. So I had a lot of time to kill as a kid. Well, my imagination was very hyperactive. And I actually remember sitting in the bathtub at 6 years old, and I just made up a song, just randomly made up a song. And what's funny is I even remember the chorus to that. And I have it in my music folder as future fodder.
Right.
Maybe I'll try to rewrite it at some point. But
get a little kid to sing it on the track.
Yeah. Oh wow, that would mess with my head. And that was, again, because I was bullied so much throughout my school years. That was one of my outlets. Was I always kind of had music going on in my head. Even if I didn't sing it out loud, I was always, it's like a radio station I could never turn off.
Right.
Which I don't know if that's a curse or a blessing. But the pivotal moment for me was when I was 13 years old. I was getting ready to turn 14, getting ready to go to high school. I saw the video for Information Society's What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy with the Spock sample. And I saw the video And I mean, it was just like this colorful explosion of motion and electronic music. And I'm just like, I do that. I do that. I want to do that. So I asked my mom to ask Santa Claus for a keyboard for Christmas. And Santa Claus gave me the keyboard, much to my mom's dismay, because the first thing I did was plug it in and just start pounding on the thing and creating music. And after about 10 minutes, she's like, can you please take that in your bedroom? So, but I tell you, I have not been the same ever since. I've always been not only in search of, just good music lyrically, but sonically. I've always been interested in new sounds. As a kid, I actually latched onto the Art of Noise, which was this wonderful electronic band in the early 80s that did a lot of samples. They would turn samples into music. And in 1982, that was a novel concept. So I latched onto them early. I latched onto Thomas Dolby, Howard Jones, Annie Lennox, just a lot of these more electronic focused musicians. But once I found Information Society, I was never the same.
Now, are you self-taught in terms of the keyboard, or did you?
I have not had any formal lessons in regards to playing an instrument.
Right.
I was involved in chorus when I was in grade school, junior high, and high school.
Right.
I actually had an interesting moment. So my junior year of high school, we were going to state competition, and the chorus teacher, she wanted me to do, I was singing bass at the time, which is kind of weird when you hear me sing now. Yeah.
Right.
And so I sang O Shenandoah, which, O Shenandoah, I long to hear you. But it's like 3 octaves below what I'm singing now.
Right.
And so I sang, I competed, but I didn't go anywhere. I'm involved in a local women's chorus named Karis. And it was really through Karis that I strengthened my singing voice as it is now. But one of the first times that I sang in a small group, we sang O Shenandoah. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you freaking kidding me? So it was a bit full circle there.
Right.
But it seems like I've always had those moments in my life where it seemed like kismet. It was like some sort of cosmic quality, some sort of fate just happened to be involved in my life.
Right. And I guess before we move on, one last question on that front, because I know with a lot of trans people, of course, voice is a very important aspect, source of glory for many. And your voice is as it is. It's not a bass. I guess the obvious. But I mean, I guess how difficult was it to transition, not just in terms of speaking voice, but to actually find your singing voice, which, I mean, to those of us who can't sing even in the voices that we've been very practiced in our entire lives, I just wonder, like, what is the process of that? How did that come about?
Well, first of all, I haven't had any official voice training. I haven't taken any voice classes with anybody. Prior to coming out, I was one of those people who could do impersonations or did silly voices or tried to talk like Yoda. So I was already used to doing strange things with my voice even before I came out. Okay. And for me personally, I wanted to sing in a range that was appropriate with my gender.
Right.
Now, I want to just say that doesn't make me any more or less valid than any other trans people. This is just something that I wanted to do.
Right.
And that was when I joined Karis, the local women's chorus. And I was actually the first trans woman to be part of that chorus. It had primarily been lesbian. And I'm like, okay, but they seemed all right with it. They did have a couple of members that left because of that, but I sang on and off with Karis for about 8 years. And in that time, I sang pretty much almost every part of the range, from the low basses to even like one song where I was singing the high soprano part.
Wow.
So for me personally, it was being in that chorus, being surrounded by other women, listening to their voices, and mimic to some degree, but I also knew that I wanted to find my own voice. And above all else, I think that's very important, is that even if you want to have the voice of your target gender, just know that it's going to take a lot of work for you to do. But if that's what you want, go for it. And like I said, that doesn't mean that I'm any more or less valid than any other trans people, because a lot of people would say that, and it kind of grates on me a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Last week I had Robin Carson on, and we talked a bit about the voice as well. And she had an injury to her throat at some point, and it's like, yeah, I just can't do that voice anymore. And fuck you. That's it doesn't change who I am. So that's not a bad segue into the next track, which is voices. Now I have a note here. I have 2 notes here under voices. who is this about? And they sound horrible. So I don't know if I missed something there, but what is going on in Voices? Who are we singing about here?
Voices actually is placed where it is for a reason on the album. Before I came out, the split in my psyche happened where I was still seeing things from the guy point of view, but then I knew there was this whole other point of view that I was starting to incorporate. And these experiences both happened around the same time. So it's two different experiences.
Okay.
The first one was actually based on a sexual assault that I experienced. So it happened when I was still being seen as a guy.
Mhm.
And my assaulter was female. I had moved to a new town and had met some people online, and they wanted to take me out to go clubbing. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I went to the club, had a nice, wonderful time. And then instead of taking me home, took me out to her place, which was about an hour away. And it wasn't in a place that had a lot of public transit. And basically said if I didn't have sex with her right then and there, that I was going to have to walk home.
That's all right.
Yeah. And, you know, I definitely think that women do commit sexual assaults, but I think because men can be so ashamed of having that happen to them, they don't speak out about it because they not only lose face, they lose respect because, well, you were sexually assaulted by a woman. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, the two that immediately popped to mind is how does a guy not want it, first of all, which
Right.
yes, guys are allowed to say no. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, like you say, the whole you let a woman overpower you. It's like, then you have the situation where it's like, yeah, do I want to walk an hour home in the dark through a place I don't know where I'm walking and et cetera,
Right,
et cetera.
exactly.
Wow.
So the second story in Voices is actually based on the last time I tried to have sex as a man. There was another friend that I met through the nightclub. She was a nice girl, but she's like, I'm not really interested, but would you be interested in going out with my friend? So it's like, okay. So again, went to the club, had a nice time, but a completely different ending. This is why they're both in the same song. It's because
Okay.
it started off with similar scenarios.
Oh, okay.
So me and this woman start kissing. It's getting hot and heavy. And I'm realizing just my jealousy of her is overpowering any type of sexual urge that I had at the time. And it starts breaking my heart. Here I am trying to be intimate with somebody. And I just don't have the heart to do it because I'm lying to myself. I'm lying to her. It's like, holy shit. So in the middle of this, I stopped and I looked at her. I'm like, I can't do this. And I used the excuse of, well, I'm still hung up on my ex-girlfriend, which had been years ago by that time, but
Right.
it was a good enough excuse. But she's like, okay, that's fine. And she didn't force the issue. So it's the same situation with two different endings. And I think for me, the compare and contrast has been something that I've thought about for a long time.
Right.
But I knew that because those were the last times I tried to be a guy. So I thought, why not just go ahead and throw those situations into a song?
And that's a very nice segue to the next track of Walk Through This Door, which again, what I'm picking up is a lot of self-doubt, a lot of, because my questions are what choice, what decision? I mean, I can venture a guess here, but
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I saw it as I was writing it as if you could look into the mirror and see yourself 20 years from now.
Mhm.
And it's that pivotal point where you have to make the decision to go forward. I don't necessarily see it as a choice. I see it as, do you be honest with yourself or do you continue to live a lie?
That's a choice.
And well, that is a choice. And I knew for me that if I didn't make that decision to transition,
Mm.
I may as well just be dead because I saw no future for myself as somebody who is in a male body. And I hate to reduce it to bodies, but when you're dealing with gender dysphoria, it's difficult to not make it about the body because that's the first thing that everybody sees. That's how everybody judges you, is on how you look, is on how you interact with them. And transition, I mean, it's a long ass process. And I'm not even talking about going from coming out to having any type of surgery. I'm talking about just coming out and then just trying to adjust,
Right.
socially and physically and every other way.
Right.
So Walk Through the Door is basically about that moment where you're confronted with your darkest fears and your deepest secrets. And are you going to choose life or are you going to choose to continue to hide?
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing is we have to, as people, be honest with ourselves, even if it hurts. I would much rather hear an uncomfortable truth than a beautiful lie.
Right.
And honesty has been something that I've always cherished in my friendships and my relationships with people. And when that trust is broken, it's just really terrible.
And it sounds like then when we get to the next track of Pass and Go, that we're through that door essentially. That now we're moving
that is
forward.
walking through the door. Actually, that song is actually really difficult for me to write because back when I came out in 2000, 2001, I started HRT about 6 months before 9/11 happened. So when 9/11 happened, I was a basket case because I was already going through puberty.
Right. We've had one puberty. What about second puberty?
Yeah, it's now I picture the meme with the hobbits and everything.
Right.
So basically, when I came out as trans, first of all, I was living with my biological father, who I was not raised with. I met him as an adult, and his family offered a room in their home so that I could get to know them. And then I came out as trans, and suddenly they wanted nothing to do with me. And basically, the first two lines of the song, I stare at the screen, and now I know you're never coming back to me. It's basically about my father. It's about basically the email that I got from them saying to not contact them at all. And it was about that moment of just completely being unmoored. And it's just, okay, well, what do I do now? So you're passing go in the sense, I pictured it like a Monopoly board, like, okay, well, here's your next turn around the board. Here's $200 and go by Baltic Avenue or something.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's basically about being disowned and, well, where do I go from here?
I'll be honest. I did not get Spiral at all. So we can skip it, or if this is like a really profound next level philosophical shit that you can fill me in on, I didn't get it. So what's Spiral all about?
It actually kind of is. Spiral is, well, first of all, it's a trance song, which is more of like a 90s dance sound. I knew that I wanted to do that type of song, first of all, stylistically, because I grew up in the 90s listening to it and just like, hey, I want to do this thing. But the lyrics themselves are actually in reference to what happens to your body and your life when you start transition, the different changes that happen to your body. I even made a little geeky reference to the fact that cells replicate themselves every 7 years. So cells are replaced in the body every 7 years.
Okay.
And when I heard that after I came out, I thought that was, wow, that's fascinating. So I have a whole new body every 7 years. Holy crap.
So if I want to hit two that I have this exact same note on before we go to a break. Venom and Lost, I have exactly the same note here. Who in capital letters underlined is this about? What is going on here?
Well, Venom is actually, as we tackle more happy subject matter here, Venom is actually about instance in my childhood where I had to deal with physical and sexual abuse.
Wow.
And just kind of how overwhelming that can be when you're a kid. There's counter vocals near the end that says, now I know what has been done. You have blocked out all the sun, which means it's hard to see anything. It's hard to grow when you feel so terrible about yourself. When you've been reduced to nothing, it's like, well, what do I do now? Lost was actually about an ex of mine who gaslit me very badly. I didn't have a choice. I was kind of stuck at her home. But part of me in the relationship wanted to change her and make her better. That's something I inherited from my mom. Thank you, Mom.
Well, and the narcissists and whatnot all prey on that, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, she always had to have control, and she ended up calling the police. And because my name was not on the lease to the apartment, I was forced to leave. And I made sure that I left. She tried to get back together with me, but I'm like, look, as much as I might want to try to help you, I can't help you anymore.
Right.
So I was lost whenever I left that relationship. And then I found somebody who treated me right. So that's basically what that song's about.
So not a great segue, perhaps, but we're going to go ahead and skip to a break. Going to play a track called The Stranger. Before we break, the CD Shattering the Silence can be found on moderatepotato.bandcamp.com. That's potato with an E, Dan Quayle style. Moderatepotato.bandcamp.com. You can find Katie Benoit's album Shattering the Silence remastered. And here we go with The Stranger.
When I try you on the phone, you're never there. Several hours later, feel like you don't care. Why the hell do I bother? Why am I even here? Do you need me anymore? Said you would be there for me, but you disappeared. Instead of filling me with hope, I feel despair. All I get is a text, no comfort there. And I'm losing my sanity. You're a stranger to me now. I know I've lost the thread somehow. Empty promises to change won't help us now. We will fall apart like this. If you choose to stay, then let me know. By your actions, not your words, that not like snow. If we never adapt, we will never grow. Is this real or artifice? I thought this was a partnership, that we were there. There is only tumbleweeds trying to see you. I see the forest and the trees, but there's not a glimmer of compassion anymore. You like to fuck the evening through, I cannot cope. But your lack of interest lies in the same thoughts of you and me together. We just fought it apart until it's all a complex charm. You're a stranger to me. I know I've lost the thread somehow. Empty promises to change won't help us now. We will fall apart like this. If you choose to stay, then let me know. By your actions, not your words, that melt like snow. If we never adapt, we will never grow. Is this real or artifice? 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 Is this real or artifice?
That was a Stranger track off of Shattering the Silence, remastered by Katie Benoit. We're here with Katie Benoit talking about music, talking about this new album. Strangers was a little bit out of order here, but you had mentioned before the show that this was one of the more popular ones and not necessarily one that was your usual fare. Tell me a little bit about this.
It actually didn't start off as a pop track. I have another musical project called 69 Susans, which is more of an experimental project. But then I started listening to this as I was putting it together. And I'm like, you know what? Why not actually take this weird sounding track that has all sorts of weird sound effects and stuff in it? And why not just try to do something poppy with this track? So near the end, I start using a lot of vocal effects. I start having kind of this chopping sound to the vocals. And I really liked it. Lyrically, again, it's about a relationship. I call it my zombie relationship because during the last year of it, basically, I hardly heard from my partner at all during this relationship. So it's like, do I stay with the zombie relationship? Because I'm not feeling any type of connection with this person now. So yeah, I was the one that broke up this relationship, for better or for worse.
Right. And if you tell me the same story about Surprised, I'm not going to call it Taylor Swifting anymore. Okay, I'm joking. But surprise, I have the same note. Who is this about?
Actually, that's about my wife now.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, we actually married back in 2013, but I actually first wrote this, I want to say about 2009. It started off kind of its rough form, and I kind of wrote the lyrics about my wife because it's like, I've been through so many terrible relationships, and although I am polyamorous, she is the person that I'm sticking with and that has stuck to me through the last 16 years now.
That's awesome. So we got another track, Repeat. which is another one of these that I feel like I could look it through it for a narrow lens, or I could look at it through a very broad universalist lens. And I just have this one note here. I just one word, perseverance. But you also talked about before the show about exploring different things and trying different things. And
Right. And I think that's very true. I think for me personally, I'm always on the quest for more knowledge. I'm always wanting to learn more things. There's so much in the world that I don't know about. And I realize this, but I'm also pretty good at trying at finding that information out when I want to find it.
right.
And so I think I don't have a static life. Everything is always in flux. And I think that's a good thing because it helps us grow and change as people. If we don't grow and change with the evidence presented to us, then we just become static. We become bitter. We don't feel like we understand other people.
Right. And it is really crazy how these themes flow into one another, because the next track was Reborn, which seems like that's a resolution of what's going on perhaps in Repeat.
Well, and I'm, outside of music, I am very political. You and I, personally, we have had a lot of political discussions on social media, and that actually does kind of lead into other political themes too. I think if you don't try to seek out change, if you don't want to create change for the better, what are you even doing in government in the first place?
So it's a calling out then.
Yeah, it's a calling for people to, if they're not happy with their lives, just change something. One small thing, one big thing, it doesn't matter.
Was there a particular event in your life that inspires this or informs this?
I don't think it was one event. I just think it's a culmination of situations in the world. And I think I've known many people who have privately come out to me as trans, but they've chosen to stay in the closet. Now, first of all, I respect that, but they also have mentioned just how hellish it is to kind of be stuck in that cycle.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, you have to respect it, but at the same time, it's like, oh God, no, don't.
It's like, why can't you just be you? But they feel responsibilities to family or to jobs or to other situations in their life.
Right.
And I will never tell anybody how to run their life.
And at the end of the day, the world is what it is. And,
yeah, exactly. And
there's a risk, and there's
I mean,
people
you run a risk
out there. Yeah.
You run a risk just driving to and from work each day, or just walking down the street. Some idiot can fiddle when he should have faddled with his car and run you over. But that's called being alive. That's taking risks is something that you have to do if you want to make that change in your life. And that's really just kind of the heart of that song right there.
Right. The cliff paints a very beautiful literal picture.
Yep.
And I'm guessing a not so beautiful metaphor. I'm not sure. It painted a beautiful picture in my head, but I'm going, okay, what is the metaphor about? Because this isn't literally about looking at the ocean, I'm assuming.
Well, it kind of sort of is in a way. Okay. At the time that I wrote that, I was picturing what it would be like. And actually, the title is a bit of a misnomer because I didn't actually picture standing on top of a cliff and looking down. But it was more standing at the shore and looking out at the ocean and thinking about how far you've gotten in this life, how many things in your life have changed. And again, that's not an expressly transgender thought. That's something that a lot of people can relate to, is just thinking back in their life 20 years, how different of a person are you now from where you were 20 years ago?
Right. So this is some personal reflection then as well.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I think even if there's a lot of personal reflection, I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people can relate to, because a lot of people 20 years ago, it's like, gosh, where was I? I was scared. I was just coming out. I was living in the city that my father lived in. It was before I got back up to Missouri. And just to compare and contrast how different I am now from who I was, it's amazing. And I think a lot of us can say that about ourselves.
Well, you hope, because if you can't, what have you been doing?
Well, then you listen to repeat until you make that change, dang it.
There you go. Now, one that I got this was rather a depressing track, the way that I heard it. And I'm wondering, because again, the placement of these on the album up until this point seems very deliberate. And I'm wondering about Adrift, because I read this as very dark.
Right. Well, now, first of all, this is a remastered version of the original album. The original album is still available to purchase. It just doesn't sound as nice as this one. So basically, on the original version, I actually started with a prelude to Walk Through the Door, and then Rules, and then Take Me Away. And then it actually ends after Reborn with an a cappella song that I didn't put on there because I didn't really like the way it sounded.
Okay.
So basically, up until Reborn, which is after Surprise, that's basically the entire set right there. Everything afterward, The Stranger, Adrift, and What Hope Have I are all kind of tacked in the end because I wanted to kind of memorialize those on CD.
Okay.
It's the first time I've done any type of CD, so it was important to me to get all the good stuff out there.
course.
So, and Adrift, it's kind of a piece similar to The Stranger in regards to what it's about. It's about the same person, but it's about what do I do now that this person is out of my life? You know, so I've cut off The Stranger and now it's just like, I wanted to do something in 3/4 time, which is not normal for electronic music, but I wanted to make something that actually sounded like you were getting kind of tossed on the waves, you were stuck in a lifeboat or an inner tube.
Right.
And it's slightly wistful, but it's also kind of scary too. I think a lot of people, when they get out of relationships, first of all, you're happy that you're out of this abusive relationship that you were in,
Right.
but also now you're kind of adrift, you're kind of, lost.
It says years since I had a compass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, that's not necessarily literal, but I think
Well,
But
an emotional compass, a romantic compass, a personal compass. Yes.
I mean, the people around you, whether they're friends or lovers or family, they kind of help guide where you go. They give you opportunities. They give you chances to interact and meet other people. And I think that when you don't have those same people around, it's easy to kind of be unmoored and just feel like you're on this lifeboat in the middle of the ocean.
Now, we talked about The Stranger, so we'll skip that and talk
Yeah.
about You're Wrong. One thing I got to say, love the drum line on that, by the way. I'm a very, very long since ex-percussionist, so I notice a good drum line I appreciate a good drum line when I hear one. But yeah, there's a little bit more drums, a little different drums on that,
Right.
especially right at the beginning.
This is-
Definitely dig
This
that.
is my big rock song,
Right, right. And it's another one where, again, I'm kind of looking for a who here and who is manipulating your feelings and, and all of that.
So You're Wrong has a very interesting history.
Okay.
I actually at first wrote it and performed it before I came out. I had a music project called Equals the Raven, and some of those songs are also available on the Moderate Potato website. So it actually started off as kind of, this woman won't leave me alone. What the heck? But it was one of my favorites from that era of my life. So I came back to it and I'm like, well, I can't exactly sing in that voice anymore because, again, I was singing bass, before.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, let me try to play around with it. And all I had to do is pitch it up a couple of notes and it worked out. So
Right.
it's not specifically about anybody this time, but it's more just kind of your standard kiss off song. Like, you don't believe in what I say, you're wrong.
Hey, can I license that for the intro to this program? I like that. Okay. And then the last one, which I was this is one because it is the last track on the album and because I've been ridiculously busy in the last couple days. I'm only listening to it for the second time as we were starting this show, so shame on me on that one. But it's What Hope Have I, which it seems like there's an obvious thing there, but I was having a hard time putting my finger on it as I was listening to it. I listened to it a couple times. But what is this all about? What is going on here?
It's kind of partially the same person that Lost was about, but it's a bit of a fictionalized version because this was another one,
This
much
is the
like,
person you thought you could help, you thought you could fix.
yeah.
Oh my
And
God. Mind blown because so much of what I wasn't getting now makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
And so, I mean, like I said, it's partially fictionalized because they didn't have whores or anything. It was just something I put in lyrically to kind of balance the song out. And I'll tell you, in the middle of this song, if you notice, there's a guitar solo. And I don't really do guitar solos. It's not really my thing, but I also put a lot of heavy electronic effects on it too.
So wait, was that you? That was you then playing that?
That was me.
On
I
the keyboard or on guitar?
both.
Wow.
I actually started off playing keyboards again when I was 13. At age 21, I switched over to guitar. And I'm more of a rhythm guitarist. I'm not a big flashy soloist, but when I have a certain vision in my head of how I want things to sound, and I use those talents to try to make things sound the way that I want. It's not something that comes to everybody, and I'm a little thankful that I have that because I don't know what I would do if I didn't. So.
Oh.
But yeah, I do tend to be kind of Taylor Swiftish in writing about my relationships.
I
But
was joking a
again,
bit about this.
but I mean, here's the thing: is that a lot of people have romantic relationships, and there's a lot of similar situations that people go through.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those things that for a lot of people is universal. There's a reason why love songs, going back to time immemorial, there's a reason why love songs and breakup songs tend to be popular.
Right. So much of this album is it's a lot of your personal story.
Mhm.
And I know that you've also spoken about some things on Facebook that I wanted to ask you about. And I guess, and this is normally something we do more towards the beginning, but can you give me a sense of your background that informs some of this music and some of the stuff that we haven't covered and some of the stuff that,
Sure.
and I think about, one of the things on Facebook that I want to ask you about that you talked about recently was a very conservative upbringing, Southern Baptist family, as I recall, et cetera.
Right.
So,
Right.
tell me about this.
It's just kind of amazing how I've gotten here from there, because it seems like it shouldn't happen. First of all, my mother's family was very much Southern Baptist. My grandmother's family was from Texas. My grandpa's was actually based out of the Ozarks. And so they were very conservative. During the time that I was living with them as a child, I went to church with them. And the church people kind of hated me because I was the little kid that asked why this and why that. And I started from a very young age challenging authority, which left my grandparents very livid. But when my mom came back into my life as a kid, she was much more kind of agnostic. She didn't necessarily believe the same things that her parents did, but still we had to deal with the family every year during the holidays. And growing up, I definitely felt the pressure to try to conform to their ideals, to try to be the perfect little Christian boy and try to, marry a girl, make her my wife and pump out some babies and,
1 for 4 isn't bad.
well, yeah, I mean,
You married a girl, right?
1 for 4 is better
got
than
that.
0 for 4. So, and growing up in the Ozarks, even if my family weren't religious, the environment around me certainly was.
Right.
And so there was the societal need to conform to those expectations, which I did not do. Not without trying. Again, I tried to. I tried to be masculine. I tried to be the boy, and it just, it never clicked with me. And throughout all my experiences, a lot of what I heard was, well, if you just pray to God, and it's like, what, God is not the ultimate fixer of everything. If you're not going to take the steps to do things yourself, then why believe in a God that you think is going to do everything for you?
Right.
And I think that bothers me. A lot of the conservative ideology bothers me because they use God as an excuse. They will lie, cheat, and steal in the name of God to get their will done. And I've experienced that firsthand from my family, from certain friends I had growing up. And I don't hate conservatives. I don't hate Christians. I don't hate anybody. But I think it's a flawed ideology. If you're planning on God being the only solution, you're shortchanging yourself and you're shortchanging the world that you live in.
It sounds like a lot of overlap with prosperity theology.
Yeah, and there is. I grew up in the 80s where you had Jim Baker and you had
We still have Jim Baker. How the fuck do we still have Jim Baker?
you can't
I mean,
get rid of him.
That guy
Holy
came
crap.
back. How do you come back after the decade that he had in the 80s? Or
And
the end of the way that ended.
Who's
Good
that guy
Lord.
with the crazy eyes that's yelling into the TV?
That doesn't narrow it down a lot, I'm afraid.
But, so I mean, growing up, I saw a lot of the hypocrisy of religion, of conservatism, and it really drove me away from a lot of the faith. Even that there's metropolitan community churches that are an LGBT-run Christian church, but I just don't feel called to be part of that faith anymore at all because of my experiences with it.
Right.
And a lot of my experiences involve the hypocrisy.
Right.
And I think that's why I write the way I do, and why for me honesty is so important, is because if you can't trust the people that you're around, if you can't trust your family, your friends, your partners, how are you supposed to have a life?
Yeah. Well, Katie, thanks so much for coming on the program. Good luck with the CD. Shattering the Silence, available on moderatepotato.bandcamp.com. Best of luck, and thanks for coming on.
All right. Thank you for having me, Eddie.
I'd like to thank Katie again for coming on the program. Highly recommend everybody check out her CD. Shattering the Silence is available at moderatepotato.bandcamp.com. That's moderate potato with an E. Just think of Dan Quayle. We're going to leave you on one of the tracks that we discussed tonight, Repeat. And as always, if you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard here tonight or suggestions for future shows, guests, or topics, you can email me at niceguy9418@usa.com. Hit me up on Facebook at Eddie Cabot. I actually have 2 pages there now, and at the moment they're both shut down. You can also find me on Twitter at Nice Guy Eddie Cab, and you can find Nice Guy Eddie's YouTube page, in my humble opinion, on YouTube. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Keep it tuned to Rainbow Radio. And this is Repeat by Katie Benoit.
You'll never find the answers you seek if you keep